that much. Let's see here. But I also have a question in case we need extra time. So I love reaching out to people and then just getting unique questions from them. Let's see.
Wow, 320 credited actors. 328 credited actors for Shin Godzilla.
Okay.
That's impressive.
Well, I guess when you say credited actors,
yeah, credited.
US doesn't credit everybody. There we go. Just go ahead and mute that really quick. And can I just say, I don't know how Angry Joe and all of the pro gamers do it with these chairs. Oh, they're uncomfortable. I don't have any lumbar support. I have to take a couch cushion and just put it under here. Makes my back not hurt. I don't know how, because like this is one of the pro gamer chairs, whatever, that's supposed to be like super comfortable, and you can do like 12 hours of Twitch streaming in these things. I don't know how you do it. I don't. It's not comfortable. Helps me get the job done, but it's not comfortable. Reminds me, I was going to check the... When is the Ava panel?
Let's see if I can find this schedule. Fortunately, the schedule's all like in PDF format, so it's like impossible to enlarge it without saving it. God damn it, I thought I saved it. Fine.
If you get the PDF, could you email it to me? I've not been able to track it down.
It's on the website.
I know, and I'm looking on the website, and I just... no idea where it is.
Let's see.
Oh, right under my damn nose. Of course it is, because that's how things work for me. Let's see. Viewing room schedule. How on earth are you supposed to read this?
Just gotta turn your head just like this.
Yeah, pop my neck while I'm at it. Okay, let's see here.
Oh, AMV contest is actually pretty early on Saturday. That's good. I always like doing the AMV contest. So that means I get to do go to the contest and go to our panels.
Yay!
To anyone who's wondering, no, I'm not entering the contest, but I do always love going to them.
Welcome, everybody. There we go. Okay. That's much better. Yeah, I still can't find ours.
There we go.
It's like 10 p.m., isn't it?
The Geek News panel?
Yeah, it should be. That's when I said it.
Let's see. Saturday.
They didn't put me like on Friday, did they?
Let's play contest events.
Oh, here it is. Panel Room 1, how to review and abridge anime on YouTube. Okay. We're in Panel Room 1. 1. I'm not weird or anything. It's only because the voices are in my head.
Oh, Kurt Depter's Minute to Win It. I'll have to try and go to that one. Oh, damn it. Never mind. It's during the AMV contest.
Ava panel. Ava panel. Ava panel. I need to double check with Aldo to see if I'm still invited to the Ava panel. So, funny story. Aldo actually thinks I've never watched Ava. Alex, did I ever get the impression that I've never watched Ava?
I'm not sure how you could ever get that impression.
Well, as people will be able to tell if they watch our Resident Evil Part 1, he's under the impression I've never seen Ava. Like, yeah, we're going to go over favorite episodes and stuff like that. I'm like, I can do that. Like, you've never seen it? And I'm like, yes. Yes, I have. What? You've seen it? You completely gave me the wrong impression, Mickelson.
Pokemon 20 Years of Myth and Legend is at 2 p.m. on Friday.
Oh, on Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
That's Pokemon. That's not the Ava panel.
I know, but I wanted to go to that.
Mm.
I wanted to go to be supportive. I can't make 2 days work. I can make one. And I won't get people mad at me. Actually, that's not even a guarantee at this point. Let's see. It's like 20 years of Evangelion, right? That's how he put it.
Yeah, I think that's what it says on the website.
Yeah, Pokemon 20 Years Myth and Legend. Okay, so that's on Friday. Then Saturday. Oh, Get in the Robot, celebrating 20 years of Evangelion. So it's 2 p.m. on Saturday. Yay! I get to talk about giant robots and getting in them. Can I get in the robot, Romney?
No. You have to abide by the robot's restraining order.
What about the other robot?
He also has a restraining order.
Is there a robot that doesn't have a restraining order on me?
I don't think so.
Well, then, damn, I'm screwed. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Geek News. I am being quiet in case people can't tell, because, again, I'm under the same restrictions that I was before. I could easily wake up my daughter and therefore have the wrath of the mother placed down upon me. So should that happen, Romney will be the honorary host while I go handle Baby. And no, not Baby from Dragon Ball GT.
And not Baby from Sister Location either.
Oh, that baby. No, not that Baby. No, I can't do that Baby.
Yeah. Or the baby from Dinosaurs.
Not the mama? Not the mom. I'm the baby. Gotta love me.
Yeah.
So what do you want to know? What's really sad is I never watched that series until my 20s, when my buddy Jin found it in an FYE for like stupid cheap.
Yeah, I never watched it either. All I have is the memories of that music video, which oddly enough was on a straight-to-video budget
No,
VHS.
I know the music video. It was on the freaking Disney Channel all the time. That's
Yeah.
that's like my only exposure.
Well, in my case,
my 20s.
In my case, how I saw it was through the straight-to-video, like low-budget VHS movie that was basically released to compete to kind of capitalize on the popularity of Jurassic Park, and that was one of the lead-ups to the movie proper. Was that "I'm a Baby, Gotta Love Me" music video?
Yeah.
But that I think what the movie basically was about was that basically these two scientists were basically trying to get this baby dinosaur back to its habitat, basically. That's most I somewhat remember, but, well, it just kind of blended in with a bunch of other things.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in my 20s, and my buddy Jin loves it to this day. He loves dinosaurs, and he'll watch it just for cheap yucks. But, well, as Alex can attest, and I love the guy dearly, I really do. I love his wife. He's not exactly that hard to entertain. So,
yeah, well, that's kind of the bread and butter of most sitcoms, really.
Yeah, and frankly, you know, like, of the trio of friends that is him, me, and my buddy Chris, we have a buddy Jason too, and he's kind of in the same one. Is like, he's the only one that would watch sitcoms because we weren't interested. We go off and watch, you know, funny anime, but that was about it. And defining funny anime is like Love Hina, Tenchi, Ultimate Muscle. Yeah, my buddy Jin had the box set. Apparently there was a box set for Ultimate Muscle.
I believe it.
So
I remember when I was a kid, I entered one of those $10,000 contests, and I actually won the consolation prize of all those video games. Like, I got the Ninja Turtles game, I got the Ultimate Muscle game, and I got the Sonic game. The Sonic game is the only one of those three I still have, because I've since sold the other two.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Alex, have I told the story about the water for Jin?
Yeah, you've told this story.
Yeah, so the guy who did the whole, he wanted to make everything real when we were playing Yu-Gi-Oh! That one time, and wanted to actually splash water on all the cards. This is Jin. I'm not going to name last names. Alda or Romney, you look like I've never told this story before.
I haven't heard it.
Okay. So back when the card game just barely started out, like Battle City had just barely started, me and my buddy Chris were playing, but that was about it. Like, him and me would go one-on-one. And eventually Chris got Jin into it. And by then, like, a lot of the Battle City cards were starting to come out into circulation. Except Jin apparently wanted to make things as real as possible. And when we were playing one day at his place, like, we were just doing a friendly kind of exhibition match kind of thing, because he never played against me. All of a sudden, he decides, I'm going to play the Yumi! And it's the water card. And so he has a big glass of water that he's just going to splash on the board. Now, he's doing this because he thinks it's going to be realism. You know, it's going to be awesome. It's going to feel like the series, right? Except I see the card, or I see the glass of water. I see him about to splash, and immediately gut instinct takes over, and I'm grabbing all my cards. Not him, though. He splashes the table. Chris is laughing there. This takes about 2 minutes before he actually sits there and goes, oh, crap! Keep in mind, he actually had some, like, really high-costing cards at that point. Like, he could have sold them eventually, and they were destroyed.
Just makes you wonder, like, just makes you wonder what would have happened if he pulled out something like Mystical Space Typhoon.
I don't even want to imagine. But I mean, this was like the guy who, when he pulled out like a dragon or whatever, he went Rah! Like the series would, and then finally he did the Umi, and he immediately. And the best part is like my buddy Chris just says, "I knew he was going to do it. I knew he was going to do it." And then he actually got mad at me. He's like, "Why did you take your cards away?" I'm like, "Because I'm not an idiot."
Yeah.
I wish I had gotten that on video, but there are a lot of moments I really wish I could have gotten on video. Even my wife doesn't believe they happened.
Yeah, the most intense we got, at least with my brothers and the kids at my school got with Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, was the one time where we tried doing the Deckmaster rule when there was that saga of the anime with Deckmasters, and we kind of made up our own things. I think, like, the one I would use as a Deckmaster was, like, I think I still have that card, actually, somewhere in here.
See, around that time was when, like, the dual disc came out. So Jin bought us dual discs and made us act out our Deckmasters. He was like, I don't care what the Deckmasters do. I don't care about the rules. Just act like your Deckmaster.
Well, we didn't go that far, but we basically tried implementing it into gameplay.
So, well, do you want to know what happened with that? We all did Jinzo, because Jinzo's easy. It's like, you want me to act out a blue eyes white dragon? That's not happening. So we all cheated out, and we just like Jinzo. That's all you had to do, was just sit there and fold your arms. And he even got the PS2 game that was based on the Deckmaster system.
Let's see. I know I have it in here somewhere. Yeesh, why did so many cards have to get sold?
I probably should do that at some point. I've got a bunch of cards. I've got whole sets that I'm just not doing anything with.
I know what's in here somewhere.
I even have some rare cards in there. Like, there was a movie promotion, Blue Eyes White Dragon, that I got.
Oh, yeah, the Blue Eyes Shining Dragon. I remember because when I went to see
it was a new Blue Eyes White Dragon with a new holofoil animation on it. So it wasn't like the one from the packs or from the Kaiba deck.
Yeah. I just know with Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, you could get it from the movie theater if you went to see Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie. And it's funny because, like, me and my sibling, we went to see Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie. We all got, basically, I got Watapon. My brothers got these, like, not so good cards. And my dad, who doesn't even play the game, got Blue Eyes Shining Dragon.
Of course he did. Because that's how that works.
Yeah.
That's what you shouldn't do. Welcome, Brony Man. This is a podcast for Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, where we talk the week's events in Geek. So there you go. And actually, we are coming up on that time, people. So let's go ahead and get things just started.
Oh, I'll have to look for that card later because I cannot find it.
Yeah, you gotta love when that happens, right?
Well, it either got sold, given to a friend, or stolen. Those are usually one of the three things.
Okay, let me bring up the agenda here so I make sure we cover all of the details.
All right. Sound speed on the microphone.
You good to go, Alex?
Shit.
That is not a yes. I can confirm that is not a yes.
Hold on. Let me just reload Audacity here.
That's all right.
I remember this card. This card was a pain in the ass whenever anybody played it.
You're getting massive glare on it, so nobody can see it.
There we go. Wall of revealing light. My older brother would always dish this one out. It was so frustrating. There's a reason you're only allowed to have one in your deck at tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just let me know when you're ready, Alex. You just joined in on Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk, and now we're gonna go ahead and go into the podcast because that's what we do. And I'm not supposed to be doing the radio puke voice, but it's not radio, so I'm okay with it. Now on to the weather. Mike, what do you have to say about the weather? The weather's great, fine, and dandy. Todd, how about you? I'm not on radio. I don't have to worry about that. I remember my instructors told me very clearly, don't do it on radio. Okay, took that to heart. I'm doing it on a podcast. That's not radio. Or as they would like to tell me it isn't radio. That's not radio. Yes, it is. It's internet radio.
Audacity's giving me problems right now.
Okay, open up Audition. Oh, wait, no, you can't.
I don't have it installed.
Of course you don't.
Stand,
Well,
stand
and on
by.
top of that, you need a login for it.
I'm gonna
I'll try it again.
Let's see. I'm just gonna try recording in Sony Vegas right now.
Okay, if it comes out crap.
It's all going to be the same whether it comes through Audacity, Audition, or anything else.
That's not actually accurate.
Yes, it is.
I love Audition files. They are awesome. They are so stupid easy to edit. Okay, just let me know when you're ready.
So at the end of the day, it's going to be an MP3.
Here.
What was that?
At the end of the day, it's going to be an MP3 from me.
But it could be a wave.
No, waves are always huge. That's why I don't like making them.
I like keeping waves in raw format, but I don't like keeping them as the edited product. This is just interesting to everybody here. Good and great, Brony, but we don't do politics. So just giving you a fair warning here.
It's on our blacklist.
Check,
Yep.
check.
I'm glad you found that out, though.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it would only be limited to certain areas, although here's your public service announcement for the week. If you live in Salt Lake County, you've probably received your ballot from the county clerk's office. Fill that out as soon as possible and have it postmarked by November 8th to have your vote cast for whatever election you care to vote in. Sooner you do it, the sooner you can ignore all the election news because, hey, you already voted.
And this public service announcement has been brought to you by Geritol. I don't know why Geritol is still existing in the market, but it is. I don't know. It was the first thing that came to my mind, Romney.
Hey, I don't blame you.
Okay, I'm rolling now.
Okay,
Yay.
so here we go. 3, 2, 1. And here we go. Welcome, everybody, to another wonderful podcast of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions for Saturday, October 15th, 2016. And this is the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's had a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week. For me, not quite so much. I've been running late this entire week, and it's been very frustrating. But that's all right, because next week, we're going to be at Anime Bonsai in Layton, Utah, and we'll be able to get to see you guys live. We're going to be doing a live podcast there. We're going to be doing a panel at 10 p.m. In one of the panel stages, and also we are doing so many contributing to panels that it'd make your head spin. I mean, I'm already on an Ava panel. Alex is doing a Pokemon panel as well as said Ava panel, all of that fun stuff. Romney will be there. And of course, we welcome you guys in the live chat. Thank you guys so much for stepping in tonight and listening to the interesting stories that we have going on. And first of all, I'm being joined by my fellow panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow critics, fellow entertainers. And first of all, we're being joined by the Shadow Blazer himself, Alex Short. How are you doing this fine evening, aside from roar?
Yes, roar. I'm doing quite well this evening, actually, because I finished a video and got it up in a timely fashion for a change. And I'm here. We're going to talk some Godzilla tonight, along with some other stuff. So excited. And Bonsai is, as you said, a week away. So even more excited.
All right, and then we're also being joined by Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, of Romney's Reviews. Romney, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing pretty good. As you can see by the lower third I have on my profile here, the first episode of Monster Clash for 2016 is ready to go and will be up by tomorrow. I literally was rendering it before signing on tonight because I finally got it done. It is finally over. The madness is over.
I don't believe you, Romney, and the reason I don't is because there's madness in your eyes right now.
There's always madness in my eyes.
Well, I can't necessarily argue with that.
But in the words of Bruce Banner, that's my secret. I'm always mad.
So first of all, I guess I need to clarify this because people are still asking me whether or not I know anything about Monster Clash. And so is it official? Can I talk about it, or do I apparently need to stay quiet?
Well, you can talk about it briefly.
Okay, Romney's in it.
Yeah,
I know what
that's
it's about, people, but I'm going to leave it open for you guys to be able to check that out. And of course, we got a myriad of stories this week. We do a tech hour. We also do an entertainment hour. But this week, we actually have something in store for hour 2 because we were actually able to get into a limited screening of Shin Godzilla or Godzilla Resurgence. And so we're going to be doing a review there. And actually, Aldo Gomez will be joining us at 11 to be able to discuss that. But we do have some stories this evening that actually got brought up by a couple of listeners, as well as piqued the interest of some of the panelists. So first of all, let's go ahead and get into kind of the tech story of the evening, which is a recent article or a recent interview being done on Amy Hennig. Now, if people don't know who Amy Hennig is, if you've played the Uncharted games and maybe even followed her into her most recent venture with EA, then you will know who Amy Hennig is. She's been a prime developer she's been a big writer and developer for the Uncharted series, as well as she is currently working with Visceral. I believe Visceral is the one she's working with on their EA Star Wars game. So she was recently interviewed by Destructoid, asking kind of the basic questions you would ask about the games that they're working on, but also about the AAA industry and how hard it is to develop for. And she actually had a couple of really awesome insights that we've brought up before, but I'm so happy that we now have a full-on developer and writer that can actually say what we've been saying. Now, this is one of those things where I really wish we could have had Aldo tonight because he understands the concepts of crunch and can be able to explain why that's a bad thing as well as me. And so she actually kind of goes into that detail of, and I'm actually going to start going into the quotes before we start getting into the discussion. The whole time I was at Naughty Dog, 10 and a half years, I probably on average, I don't know if I ever worked less than 80 hours a week. And that's crunch time for a lot of programmers, and that's actually kind of a regular schedule for a lot of development companies, which is kind of sad. It's sad to me because, you know, Naughty Dog did it, or Naughty Dog does it and did it, but EA is probably one of the bigger, what's the word I'm looking for? Bigger
perpetrators
of it, because they will do it pretty much on a regular basis, especially when it comes to properties like the sports games, when it comes to properties like Star Wars.
Or even stuff like The Sims.
The Sims, SimCity, all of that stuff. I've even heard horror stories from BioWare devs on trying to get Mass Effect 3 out. So that crap happens, and we're talking like a full 12-hour day, people. So and here's the thing. We're not talking Monday through Friday. In some cases, crunch goes all the way into the weekend. So that's 12 hours every day that you're spending at the office. And all you're doing is crunching data. All you're doing is working on story. All you're doing is working on assets. That's pretty nasty to go into, and sad because it literally leaves no time for any kind of life outside of the company. And Hennig actually does actually put in some good insights into this, is the fact that it's burned her out so bad. She's thoroughly convinced that if she got into another crunch title, she'd probably drop it. And I can't say I'd blame her. I don't know about you guys, but I can't say I'd blame her in that aspect. She even mentions that she would work for like an indie project before she would work for a AAA developer again.
Apparently she's doing a Star Wars title, though.
Yeah, I just said that. She's doing the Visceral Star Wars title. She's the writer for it.
Yeah. And one quote I definitely find very apt to describe the problem with the AAA industry is that she describes it as basically an arms race that is unwinnable, which is very much the truth. I mean, in the past, the AAA titles used to try to either be really hard or really challenging or try to use some sort of gimmick, but nowadays, a lot of what guides a lot of AAA development is kind of the opposite. How accessible it is to every gamer, every casual gamer and their mother, as well as how many famous celebrities or how many famous intellectual property ideas can we work into it. And we're kind of seeing in the games industry what's kind of been happening in film for a long time, where everybody sees the one thing that worked and makes a lot of money every year, and now everyone and their mother is trying to find their special secret formula, often to the detriment of the actual product itself.
Yeah, basically, in order to be able to find that perfect formula that we can get a yearly release game out or a every other year release out, it's unfortunate, but the employees that are working their butts off to get that code out to make sure that they have stable builds. One of the reasons that we have broken builds in games right now is because you have too many game developers that aren't getting necessary sleep. That aren't getting aren't getting a flow of ideas. This hurts everybody by every stretch. And it's one of those things that I really wish that AAA development would cancel. In fact, especially in the concept that they've got the funds, they've got the ability to be able to do these games on a regular or on a every other year, and I'm talking like every 2-year kind of basis, but they don't, because they want to keep having that money flow even when the games aren't that different from each other.
Yeah, especially when you say have a long, elaborate story planned out that basically has to be scrapped because they try to turn into a yearly franchise. Case in point, Assassin's Creed was supposed to be a trilogy, was supposed to lead to something, but then Ubisoft said, nope, we're going to make this into a yearly franchise. So all that story, all that building we got in Brotherhood, toss it.
But I'm also going to point out, like, there are games that do lend themselves fairly well to yearly releases. The sports games, EA's got that down to a science at this point. They've got that figured out. And yeah, they're still running people in crunch for those, but I can guarantee you the crunch isn't half as bad when a brand new engine is out. Because then at that point, pretty much that the next 3 years worth of games are going to be in that same engine. And so at that point, those developers are getting rest in between that. They're maybe making a couple of tweaks in the engine, but that's about it. When they're actually overhauling, so like, for example, the most recent FIFA game, that was in a new engine. So at that point, that would be the crunch time for them and would be an absolute horrible time. But then the next 3 years are going to be in that engine, and it's not so bad. You just have to rearrange the rosters kind of thing.
Yep.
Even then, I would say that needs to be DLC, not necessarily a full-on game.
Well, then again, it can go either way because, I mean, when you're trying to base a game on a real institution like FIFA, where people can be knocked out of major and minor leagues in soccer at any given year. I mean, for example, there's the YouTube-sponsored soccer team, AFC Wimbledon, that slowly worked their way to now being able to be included in FIFA because they basically had to work their way up the lower leagues to get into the lowest possible league that EA features that FIFA would allow to be put in the game. And so I can see why they would have to do an update with the release, because it's just like, okay, for this year's release, these teams made it to this league that FIFA says we can put in the game, so we have to create a new roster and a new sorting engine.
Okay, so I'm probably not giving a good example, but like the NFL games could be done in that way. Their improved rosters could be done as DLC. Because there's not a whole lot of change there. NBA, same thing. But it's just one of those things that EA has never ever wanted to fix. But that's kind of the deal that they're going with.
Well, it's mainly because they have a monopoly, because they're the only ones that they actually have the license from, the NHL, the NFL, the NBA.
Yeah,
they're
basically that. Let's have other people make them.
Well, you'd have to take it up with the NFL, NBA, all those, because they're the ones who decide it, and so NFL's just like, okay, EA, you can afford the like $3 billion it costs to license everything. So that's really what it comes down to.
Alex, what are your thoughts on the kind of another story where we're talking about AAA development and how hard it is for the employees that work in it?
Yeah, I see where she's coming from. I think this is a problem that really is throughout the entertainment industry. We've seen a lot of this, not only in games, but a lot of it is in the Japanese anime industry as well. And when you see these stories, it's just like, you kind of wonder, like, boy, what motivates people then to keep going here and keep working at it? And it's just like, you understand, well, part of it is just that passion and that labor of love that sometimes they put up with it. I'm not saying that necessarily it has to always be this bad, of course. I think there's always room for improvement and to improve the conditions. And I think she's definitely got that point where the AAA industry is kind of in this unwinnable arms race, because every company just keeps looking how to keep beefing up their specs more and more, and fans keep demanding newer and brighter and polished tech, but not really understanding the time and effort that needs to really go into it. And now we've all been conditioned to expect these endless yearly franchises.
in that regard, like, they don't understand how much effort goes into giving you that shiny new toy that you can use in a Call of Duty game. And then at that point get mad when there isn't a new shiny toy in the next game because they're working off the same engine, which isn't really a motivator for them to do anything different.
Yeah.
But I do also like her words in the fact that, like, okay, she did it with this project. She's not doing it the next time. In fact, she goes out and clearly says, I would love to be able to do just like an indie game on the side while I do other things. And here's the thing, too. I actually want to get into this with Alex because, like, for a programmer, it's hard. For a writer, it's harder because that's essentially the role that EA is breathing down on. Because at that point, you're expected to come up with brand spanking new stories every stinking year to be able to keep this series fresh, to be able to keep things going. And writers, like, some writers can do that, and man, I applaud them. But there are some that just would go into rampant burnout.
Well, yeah,
I mean, there's reasons there are writers that just take like 3-year-long breaks from the industry because they just get burnt after that one project.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you consider with writing for video games as well, there's a lot of stuff that you can come up and create in scenarios and dialogue that will never make it in the final game for one reason or another. I mean, when you look at what happened with Mass Effect 3 and how they were planning on having a more conclusive ending, but then EA said, yeah, keep it more ambiguous because we want to make more. We don't care if it screws the pooch.
Well, and at that point, like, I mean, BioWare has gone on the record. They wanted to end things the way that they did, and EA said, no, you can't. Because we want to be able to milk this franchise like we milk Call of Duty, like we milk the sports franchises. And that's just one of those things where for a writer, that's a horrible, horrible thing to do because you run out of ideas. You're not producing them as fast as you need to. And again, there are people that can do this, but there are also a lot of really good writers. They need a couple years break after a project.
That and it's also just a matter, and it's something that has come up on the Extra Credits YouTube channel quite a bit, is that we still have game companies haven't quite figured out how to crack the riddle that is actually setting aside time for pre-production. Because that's another underlying issue, is that you basically have a lot of people trying to make sure that everybody, and I mean everybody, is working. And so if you try to take a bunch of people, like, they're basically trying to make sure that there's always something to program, an asset, that there's always assets being built, that there's always engines being built, that there's always things being tested, just so that way you can keep people employed, basically. But at the same time, that means if everybody's working on that stuff, that doesn't really give a lot of time for a team to actually do a lot of the pre-production work, whether it's hammering out the story, hammering out the core design concepts. I mean, there's the classic story of how Miyamoto would draw Mario maps on graph paper and basically would use that to plan out the levels. But in today's AAA market, people don't have that kind of time to actually hammer out that core design aesthetic that would tie the whole game together. And so you end up with a lot of third-person action games. And
here's the thing, too, is that, you know, you brought up Miyamoto. I mean, that was even back in those days. Yeah, it's not considered AAA, but it was still crunch time for them, too. Like Miyamoto's probably not the best example, but think of all the Atari developers that were literally told you have to develop a game in 2 months kind of thing. You know, I don't mean to bring this up, but E.T., that's a perfect example where I can't remember the developer for it, but he wanted more time with it. And instead Atari said, no, you get 3 months.
Well, yeah, they had 3 months because they wanted it out by Christmas, and they spent most of the money that would have gone into the game buying the rights to the film from Spielberg. And that's why it crashed and burned and ended up in a landfill.
Exactly. So there really isn't too much to add to this. I really wish we had all those insights, but yeah, it's another example of the AAA industry actually in some cases motivating developers not even to go into AAA, to go and do indie development, because I know a ton of indie developers that literally look at AAA and go, I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole. I'd never survive.
Yeah.
Maybe not even just, you know, my thought about this is maybe not just purely the indie route, right? But, you know, room for AA level games, and maybe that is technically indie, because I don't know what really constitutes
right now. The way that the gaming industry works is you're AAA or you're nothing, and that's a dumb thing to think about, because there are developers that are doing fairly well that do actually adhere to a better workflow and everything like that, and they get shunned because they're not the yearly titles.
And I think that's a big problem with the industry right now. Is you're right, because it's either your AAA or your small budget Steam indie, and I think we need sort of a double A industry, I guess you could say. We need a
which we kind of have, but even then, it's very much a dwindling aspect of the games industry. I mean, off the top of my... Because very much what used to be a lot of the AA titles back in the day were a lot of the lesser-known franchises a lot of game companies would have. So for Capcom, Mega Man would be the AAA, but then you would have, like, Mega Man and Street Fighter would be your AAA titles, but then you'd have something like, say, Ace Attorney or Monster Hunter being
an experimental title that isn't necessarily that much, like, it isn't pumped out that fast. Jira, you actually brought up a good point. It's like Destiny where they excluded a lot of the plot. Exactly that, because that thing was crunched endlessly. I still know tons of people who are pissed off that so much story was left out of the game when it could have been told in the game. I know that they've since fixed it with expansions, but it's something that should have been there when this is supposed to be a game that like rivals MMOs in length. And another example of a company that this just came to me, but the original Rare, I'm not talking the current Rare, but the Rare that was doing like Banjo-Kazooie, they would have been considered a lesser, like a AA kind of company because they didn't come up with things on a yearly basis. They came out with stuff every 3 or 4 years. And yet Rare is, or at least old Rare is regarded and revered as one of the best companies that ever existed.
Yeah. And then at the same time, you even have lesser known companies that, although they never really made it on the map, they did manage to put out games at least competently well enough that you could pick them up today and they'd still be kind of fun. That's where you get companies like Data East, for example, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. And granted, although a lot of their titles were more or less knockoffs of more popular games, it was very much, okay, this is just the mid-range thing. We have our Street Fighter clone. We have our various arcade games that we like to create. And I'm thinking, so those would be your Data Easts. Those would be Enix back in the day before they got bought out by Square. That would be, I'm literally looking at my game shelf for examples. That would even be stuff like Atlas. The kind of stuff that Atlas would put out would be considered kind of AA, except even they've succumbed to the whole spectacle creep by trying to make their games even bigger and bigger, as seen with the upcoming Persona 5.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's upsides and downsides to that, but at the same time, there's upsides and downsides to releasing a game every year kind of thing. I think we've pretty much hammered this in. It's just another example of we really shouldn't be doing that to our game developers. I don't know how these guys survive it, and in some cases they don't.
Nope.
So final thoughts before we move on to the next story.
Vote with your dollar.
Vote with your dollar. And the developer you were thinking of for E.T. Atari was David Scott Warshaw.
Yes, thank you. David Scott Warshaw. Okay, so the next story that we're going to go into is something that was brought up by a listener, as well as I think it was Romney that also found the story. This was actually an announcement from New York Comic Con, is the fact that I think they've officially announced that Ultimate Spider-Man will be ending. And in light of that, because of recent deals that have been made with Sony, we will be getting a brand new Spider-Man animated series debuting on Disney XD in 2017. Right now, it's just being called Marvel's Spider-Man. We don't know too much about the details here, but it seems to be from a similar animation team that was doing Ultimate Spider-Man, and the animation style actually looks very similar to another Disney series that was done a couple of years ago, Spectacular Spider-Man.
That's not Disney, actually. That was Sony.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
That's a whole separate can of worms that I was going to actually mention it, but Spectacular Spider-Man was actually helmed by Sony, but that's part of a whole other legal battle.
Yeah, and also this is really great timing in lieu of the fact that Spider-Man Homecoming is coming very soon. I don't think is it due for 2017?
I believe
July 2017.
July 2017. Yep. So at that point, this is a great advertisement for that movie, as well as being able to get a Spider-Man series off the ground. So obviously, I'm excited for it because if it's Marvel doing it, obviously, I don't think that they're going to be doing a bad job with it. I'm worried that certain Marvel developers will be on the job. Cough, Joe Quesada, cough, cough.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am excited. And from what I've been able to tell, I wasn't able to find a trailer, sadly, because I would have loved to have seen the animation for it. But it does look good from whatever stills I've been able to find. Alex, you're kind of the dedicated Spider-Man fan here. Here's the sad part. You don't have access to this.
No, because I don't have Disney XD.
Yeah, you don't have Disney XD. I mean, eventually it's probably going to make its way to the streaming services, but right now, I mean, if you had access to it, would you be watching it?
Maybe I'd want to see. I'd want to see like I guess more of a concept like trailer, either a trailer or just something a little more. At least watch the pilot episode to see how it at least plays out as a first impression.
Okay. So, all right. So you would at least give it a shot just to see the direction that they were going with it. But I'm guessing if it took a left turn, you might not stay interested, roughly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really depends on the overall execution for me to say. I'm willing to give it a look at.
Would you prefer it to be based like around the Homecoming Spider-Man, or would you not have a problem with it being just its own story, its own telling of Peter Parker and his life?
I wouldn't have a problem with it either way, really. If it was based on Homecoming, that makes sense because Homecoming is coming out. No pun intended. But but if it was wholly original, that'd be fine too. Just it's fun to see more Spider-Man.
Before I can already feel the wrath of the Aldo coming down on me. Would you have a problem because we don't know this yet? I've combed the article. It looks like it's going to be Peter. Would you have a problem if it was based on another Spider-Man like Ben Reilly or Miles Morales? Any of those iterations? I
wouldn't have a problem because I don't really read comics, so I've never seen any other incarnations of Spider-Man beyond Peter Parker. So I'm so used to Peter Parker, but I'm open to the idea of seeing somebody like Miles Morales or any other character. And, well, frankly, it's probably going to be Peter Parker anyway, because that's the staple.
That's kind of the default character. One.
Yeah.
What about you, Romney? How do you feel about this series coming out?
I'm wary because although I haven't really read a lot of the comics, I did watch a great deal of a lot of the different cartoons. The first one I saw was the one from the 90s. That is kind of the voice of Peter Parker right here. But the animation, that show hasn't aged well. And I know there were a lot of people that had a lot of harsh things to say about Ultimate Spider-Man because of a lot of the things they tried to do to tie it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe before they actually got the rights to incorporate Spider-Man properly, which led to a lot of various changes, a lot of small things that led to much larger things, as well as just general complaints of just how the series was handled, especially with them trying to adapt stuff like the Spider-Verse, trying to explore things like Miles Morales, like Spider-Gwen, and trying to throw basically everything and the kitchen sink too. And so I haven't really heard that many good things about Ultimate Spider-Man. Whether or not this new series will be different, it's hard to say, because a lot of people kind of regard Spectacular Spider-Man as kind of the best way to look at it is that when it comes to Spectacular Spider-Man, it pretty much is to Spider-Man what Batman the Animated Series is to Batman, where it's kind of seen as the most faithful adaptation of the character, and it's a bit of a tough note to follow. And the reason we'll never get a reboot or revisit to Spectacular Spider-Man is because Sony decided to basically burn any possible bridge of anybody getting the rights to that animated series in the near future.
See, I'm kind of not there. It's one of those things where Spider-Man, at least to me, hasn't had that Batman the Animated Series kind of feel, because I've watched the Fox Spider-Man, and I've watched Spectacular, I've watched Ultimate, and the only thing that I have to say about every single series, it's pretty much kind of the same thing repeating, is that there are good things to them. There are good episodes and stuff that I hold on to. Spectacular Spider-Man has them. Ultimate Spider-Man has them. But there are also bad elements that just kind of take me out of it, and therefore it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, and like
so at that point, that's one of those things where, like, even with Batman the Animated Series, even a bad episode can turn out to be a good episode kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man doesn't really have that.
Well, and again, that's based on like who you ask and a lot of the various debates. I mean, I'll probably hold off until I see an actual trailer, but as I basically said when I posted the story to the Geek News page, this very much is hasty backpedaling because now we actually have the rights to the character. And honestly, that may be for the better because, let's face it, they're trying to do the expanded cinematic universe in animated form, and it's become just as convoluted as the comics, so much so that you actually have to buy comics based on those shows just to understand what the hell is going on. Yeah. And so, honestly, I'll withhold judgment until I see a trailer, until I kind of know what direction they're going. And honestly, I just hope that they don't try throwing in random gimmicks. Because, I mean, yeah, Deadpool's an interesting character, but You don't have to throw in Deadpool. You don't have to do the whole who's who of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Marvel Universe in general in your animated show. That's kind of what hurt Ultimate Spider-Man, was that they're just like, let's introduce all these other characters instead of actually focusing on the core story.
And they did well with certain characters, and then they demeaned others. So, like, I thought the portrayal of Deadpool was awesome, but then their portrayal of Wolverine was frustrating to me. The other thing, too, is I would also like to point out, because this barely came to me, could it be worse than the MTV Spider-Man?
Probably not. And
no, that's like the worst I've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, it like the writing was okay, but really the animation. I mean,
the animation killed it. Like,
yeah,
it made it so hard to even listen to the plot. I hate to say it that way, but that's how I feel about the MTV Spider-Man.
Yeah, and honestly, with something like Spider-Man, I mean, there have been many iterations. Hopefully they won't try to adapt some of the not as popular storylines like, say, the Clone Saga or One More Day. I mean, there could be a way to do One More Day right, but you'd have to do too much groundwork, and let's face it, the powers that be are going to want to keep Peter Parker as a teenager for as long as they can. I mean, the cinematic universe has already...
They're going to try and tell their own stories. That's the thing. Is like every Spider-Man series tries to tell the origin of the villains as well as Peter in different lights. So I could definitely see that happening. Final thoughts before we move on to the big slew of DC news that we got this week.
Will he do whatever a spider can? Who knows? Just
Spider-Man! I still love that moment in the movie, too. That's great. Where are you, Spider-Man?
Yeah. Sadly, that was one of the better movies, even compared to Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah. and just for Alex here, because he always asks for it, Bonesaw's ready. There you go. You got your Macho Man tonight. So let's go ahead and move on to the next story, which is a slew of DC stuff. So we got listener suggestions for these stories, as well as Aldo actually was able to track down a good portion of these. And we're going to go ahead and start off with some of the lighter stuff. The first being that it's been announced that there will be a Justice League Power Rangers comic crossover. And I got to say, part of me is just excited. If for no other reason, and I explained this to Alex, and I think on the stream earlier on, I want to see this moment happen. They kill the monster with the Justice League. Rita sends down the wand. The monster grows. We go through the whole 10-minute prospect of summoning the Megazord. Superman literally looks at them and goes, really? Flies up, punches the crap out of the monster. It flies halfway across the earth. Problem solved. Why do we have to do the 10 minutes?
Well,
we're talking about a hero that literally deals with giant robots all the time.
Yeah, but keep in mind, as funny as that would be, that probably wouldn't necessarily be in character, and Bruce would probably be the kind of person who say, hey, let's let them do that thing. Let's focus on our thing.
That's the thing, too. Is like Bruce would question it, but at the same time, Bruce would say, it's okay, Clark. Let them do their thing. Yeah,
you'd probably be like, make yourself useful, get people out of this, basically like, hey, these buildings are abandoned, make yourself useful, and get the people out of here.
But I halfway want to see, if you've seen Justice League War, how they portray Batman in that, I almost half want to see Batman steal one of the power coins and go, what's this thing do? And just start flinging it around. That's just me, though.
Yeah, well, that we might get something somewhat like that, given that the story is supposed to start with Zack accidentally ending up in the DC universe and basically in the crosshairs of Batman. So
yeah. So do we know, like, the official, like, is this the Rebirth Justice League that they're going to be meeting up with?
I'd assume so, given that the promotional art does feature Cyborg. So
yeah. Because I all the artwork that I've seen has been Superman, Batman. I think I've seen Wonder Woman in there, and I think I've seen Flash, and I did see Cyborg. So at that point, I'm thinking it's going to be the Rebirth Justice League meeting with the Power Rangers, and it's going to be, I'm guessing, the comic version of the Power Rangers, right?
Yeah, that's going to tie in with the current run of the Boom Comics Power Rangers comics, which have been an enjoyable read, although the most recent issue I read has been kind of meh, mainly because of where they are in the story arc, but at least it shows, like, okay, they're at least giving it to people who are a little bit more familiar with the material. It's not going to be the awkward JLA Avengers where most of the DC staff does the work.
Exactly. Alex, this is actually one of those, I would actually say this comic is one of those attempts to be able to bring in new readers, because obviously you are a Power Rangers fan, but you also are kind of a DC fan. You've seen Justice League, you've seen Batman the Animated Series. I think you've seen Superman, haven't you? The Superman WB series. So at that point, is this like a motivator for you to at least pick up one issue and see how well it works out?
It might just be. I might just pick up one issue just out of the sheer morbid curiosity to see how Justice League and the Power Rangers will coincide with each other. This seems really off the walls crazy that I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I'll have to read to find out.
Yeah, exactly. I'll admit I would be interested in it, but I'd probably be interested when the miniseries is done, and then I can just read it all the way through. But it is an interesting thing to look at, because how do the Power Rangers interact with the Justice League? Like, we at least have Billy in there. He's supposed to be the comic book geek. Is he going to know who Superman is?
Well, honestly, I don't think, even in both the comics and the TV series, it was never really the comic book geek. He was very much more a tech nerd.
Yeah, he was the stereotypical geek kind of thing. So
Yeah,
at that point, in a lot of cases, that was the tech nerd.
Yeah, honestly, like, of all the characters, and I'm just going from my recent rewatching of the series, I think the only one out of them who probably would even know what the comic characters would be like would probably be Zach. Mainly because compared to Zoo Ranger, they basically swapped the personalities of the Black and Blue Rangers when adapting it to America. And so I'm thinking, yeah, Zach's probably the character out of all of them who's probably the one who reads comics.
But then at that point, like, would he know who Superman is? Would he know who Batman is?
That's true, because that's even a fair point. Because even though he reads comics, there's no guarantee that there would be the DC comics in the Power Rangers universe. I mean, Watchmen answered that pretty abruptly with their whole Tales from the Black Freighter. And so that'll definitely be an interesting thing, and that may be why Zach is the unlucky person who ends up getting trapped in the DC universe.
I almost want to have like that moment where like Zach goes up to Superman and goes, "I'm your biggest fan. Can I have an autograph?" And just because Superman's a good guy, he does the autograph and he's fine. That's just kind of my personal want, but yeah, I'm excited. It sounds to me like we're all excited for the Power Rangers DC crossover. I have a feeling Aldo is too, because I think this is kind of right up his alley. He was actually the one that tracked this down. The other thing too is a Justice League announcement. We have another character that's going to be in the Justice League film and a recent casting, and that is going to be the, for lack of a better term, the sub character in the Aquaman comics, Mera, is going to be showing up in Justice League, and she has been cast Mera has been cast as Amber Heard. So Amber Heard will be playing her. Yes, Romney, I said that wrong. I totally did. But it's 11 o'clock at night, people. Amber Heard, I'm actually not too familiar with. At least I don't think I am. What about you, Romney? Do you know any of her work?
I've heard the name. I may have seen her in some roles, but I can't quite place it off the top of my head, which is why I'm
Zombieland.
I've got IMDb right now.
There's Zombieland. I know that's one of them. And
Zombieland. It looks like a lot of TV.
I know she's been in a few other lesser known films that weren't necessarily that good. I just need to confirm that suspicion real quick.
It sounds to me like she doesn't have enough to where we can actually judge her acting skill.
Okay, she is the actress I'm thinking of, because I did see her in 3 Days to Kill, which was a flawed movie with a lot of problems. But she's in stuff like Pineapple Express, Never Back Down, Drive Angry. She's basically played a lot of smaller parts in a lot of other movies, but she's basically she's gone around. She's in Zombieland, was even in stuff like The OC, for example. And so yeah, at least with what little I've seen of her, I wasn't particularly impressed, but I don't hold that against her, because the films I just happened to see her in are not very good movies. So I pretty much can go either way.
That was going to be my next question to you, is like, was she responsible for the fact that they were lackluster? It doesn't sound to me like it was.
No, especially when you have a Luc Besson script being directed by Luc Besson that's basically, it's Taken, but with Kevin Costner instead of Liam Neeson.
Yeah, that's going to totally work there. Alex, now you are not familiar with the Aquaman universe. I think the most that you are familiar with the Aquaman universe is anything that's been done with Justice League, correct? Oh, And he just barely said to me he's having some internet issues, so he's going to go fix them. So
Yeah, so
I'm
basically,
going to go into my opinion, and that is that I like the fact that we're getting Mara.
yeah, we should probably explain who Mara is for listeners who aren't as familiar.
Well, here's the thing. She kind of changes from the last couple of Aquaman comics I've read. The way that I understand her is that she is one of the more magically adept in Atlantis, but works for the previous ruler, because in some cases there was an Atlantean king. Most of the time there was a queen, and she's the one that kind of helps out Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman, get adjusted, as well as kind of becomes the love interest, as well as the sidekick when there isn't an Aqualad kind of character. I'm probably murdering that according to Romney.
Not necessarily, because
that's my understanding of Mara.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's kind of seems to be an understanding. It basically says like wife, queen, and queen to Aquaman. You can keep in mind there's a lot we still haven't seen about how Aquaman, like what kind of role Aquaman and Atlantis plays in the larger DC cinematic universe. So it's very much a case of, I mean, looking at the photos, she looks like the character. I mean,
oh yeah, we have some cast photos here of her as Mara, and it looks legit. It looks authentic. Let me see if I can bring it up on screen share so you guys can check it out. There we are. So that's her official costume as Mara. And that's pretty accurate considering the more recent iterations of Mara. So I'm not disappointed by that, but I agree with you. I think 80% of this hinges on the fact that, yes, she is in Justice League, but she's also in Aquaman. And how are they going to do the origin of Aquaman? What Arthur Curry are they going for? Because there's been kind of 3 iterations of Arthur Curry. So we could get either a super badass, or we could get a super timid person.
Well, given that they cast Jason Momoa,
probably the badass.
Probably the badass. I mean, because keep in mind, they're obviously pulling a lot of things from the New 52, but one thing, and Aquaman is probably one of the good comics that came out of the New 52, just because of the self-awareness of Aquaman's reputation to the public eye. They basically made fun of that and basically explored the idea that he's the least popular superhero that most people don't think is actually effective. I mean, my favorite story from that run was literally he ended up trapped in the desert. He's just like, I am never going to live this down. And it literally, you see the headline, like, Navy rescues Aquaman from desert. And he's just like, God damn it.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm at least excited that we are going to get this, but I'm still interested to see how well she pulls it off, because I haven't seen her in any of the stuff that I found in the IMDb. So let's go ahead and move on into the next piece, which I have a feeling Alex intentionally ducked out of, because he didn't duck out of it this time, because usually when we're talking about controversial things, it's just me and Romney.
Yeah, it tends to be our luck, but Alex seems to have managed to come back right in time.
So we get to talk about controversy now, and that is that in a recent announcement this week, I believe is when it happened, it is officially canon that, first of all, Wonder Woman is a UN ambassador. Yay! She's a UN ambassador. She's been a UN ambassador. I don't know why that's a big announcement. But the other thing, too, is that she is officially in canon bisexual. And apparently, that's an offensive thing. At least that's what the internet tells me.
And to be honest, there could be a bit of a case made to it, mainly just because of how bisexuality has been handled in comics, and that could be where a lot of this knee-jerk anger is coming from, because it's often been used, like, and I'm just going to come right and say it, but oftentimes at both DC and Marvel, they often have characters be bisexual rather than gay, just so that way they can basically have it both ways in terms of, okay, well, we can pair them with girls and we can pair them with guys, and we don't have to worry about like make any weird canonical explanations. And some have done really, really good stories that have explored that sort of thing, like with certain runs of the Batwoman comic, but there's also been times where it's been done poorly, like, say, randomly retconning Selena Kyle into being bisexual for no goddamn reason, and even in the story that explains that, not being executed particularly well. So I can understand why some people might be upset about this, because it really comes down to, how is this going to be written in the comics proper? Are they going to do it well? Are they actually going to put the forethought into it? Or are they basically just saying that she is just to get the controversy, just to get people to buy more comics, and not really put any thought into how that actually affects the story?
Yeah, so the first thing that I actually looked into when I saw this official announcement is, who is writing Wonder Woman? Because that's really what I care about. I love the Gail Simone run. And I tend to agree with a lot of people that Wonder Woman hasn't had the best luck when it's come to writers. Some people make stupid mistakes and some people just make outright or make more subtle ones. So I looked up the writer, and the writer for at least Wonder Woman Rebirth is Greg Rucka. Now, Greg Rucka, the way I understand, he used to do like political crime thrillers before he came to DC, and he actually has written for DC for quite a while. The sad part is that one of the greatest monikers to his record is Countdown, or Countdown to Final Crisis, if you don't know it any other way. Go watch a Linkara video. You'll understand that really, really quick. But that's one of his monikers. But he's actually one of those few where I would say it's like a 50-50 writer.
Yeah.
And so at that point, not who I would trust with a character development like this.
Yeah. Now,
Wonder Woman.
Now, to kind of try to, because I can understand even somewhat why they would think the idea, because you have to take into consideration what kind of nation Themyscira is. It's a nation of all women. Naturally, there probably would be romantic relationships amongst the people. It tends to happen really in any society. So at least Wonder Woman as a character, you can kind of make it make sense, where it's like, okay, she grew up on Themyscira for most of her life until the arrival of Steve Trevor. And it's even argued that she didn't leave Themyscira because of Steve Trevor. She left because she wanted to see the world, won the whole challenge of bullet and bracelets to basically become Themyscira's ambassador to the world of man. And so at least with a character like Wonder Woman, it can make some sense, but I'm with you, Adam. It's very much a case of it could be something that could, I mean, it's a good idea if explored properly, but there's the rub. It needs to be explored properly.
Which in a lot of cases, DC hasn't had the greatest of track records when it came to writers for Wonder Woman as a whole.
Or even approaching issues of bisexuality and LGBTQ issues as well.
So at that point, Aldo Gomez has been able to join us, a board offline. So we'll go ahead and chime you in on the most recent story here, which is we're talking about It's Canon, Wonder Woman is bi.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on this, Aldo?
It's actually been a thing that's been in the works for a long time. It's always been hinted at, never really outright said. Yeah. And part of the reason why a lot of this happens, actually, I was just reading this because of Wonder Woman Earth 1, written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Yannick Paquette, is because there's always been a lot of So Wonder Woman from the very early writings has always been very controversial in the sense that she was not necessarily a feminist icon, but a lot of like bondage and sexuality icon.
Yes.
And a lot of that stems from the fact that she comes from an all-female society of warriors, where a lot of that kind of stuff was inferred and never outright said. And it wasn't until they did this recent book where they've explored kind of her role in this society, and it's very much like Island of Lesbians, but it's not played sexually. It's kind of like a bunch of women that live together on an island, and there's no men. So that's
technically is supposed to be a thing because, I mean, Themyscira was sealed off from the rest of the world. Yeah. Man's world was not accessible to them. So that's why you have that kind of a society.
Well, no, man's world was accessible. They sealed themselves off.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain. Yeah. They sealed themselves off from it in order to keep with their oaths to the gods, I believe. Yeah. So at that point, I mean, what is your thoughts on them doing it? Like, is Greg Rucka the right guy to do it?
Well, it's not Greg Rucka. It's just in general. He's not the one that wrote this. If anybody wrote it, it was Grant Morrison that kind of brought it to the highlight.
Yeah, it's just Greg
Rucka is one of the two writers that's on the current Wonder Woman mainline, but you have to also remember that there's several Wonder Woman titles going on at the time, including like Justice League, Trinity, and I think it might have been canceled, but Superman and Wonder Woman. Like, it's not just one writer in charge of this. This was a decision kind of made a few...
This was a decision made across DC.
Yes, a while back. It wasn't Greg Rucka's decision. He's not the one that's spearheading the lesbian fest. It's just like, this is the decision that was said because of this book that came out a few months ago. And people were like, whoa, wait a minute, is she a lesbian? And no, DC was like, she's bisexual.
So at this point, would you, because right now the discussion, I guess, is DC doing this because they've got some good stories that they can tell with it, or are they simply doing this for like a TNA reason? What's your take on it, Aldo?
It's not because of stories that they're going to do. It's because of stories they've had. Like this is just to confirm her past.
Okay. So I mean, at that point, I'm okay with it. I mean, the other announcement that she's officially going to be a UN ambassador, I believe they've done that before.
No, like in real life.
Oh, really?
Like in real life. Did you read the article, Adam? Did you do your homework?
I may have skimmed over the UN ambassador.
No,
part.
she's an actual UN ambassador in the real world.
Oh, okay. All
like
right.
her, like the character, not Linda Carter, not Gal Gadot. Like the actual Wonder Woman character is an official U.S. ambassador in the real world.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay,
there you go.
I'm pulling this up because I'm just like I missed that.
What?
Yeah. The other part of this is that she is a UN ambassador. So at that point, it doesn't sound to me like it's as bad as I thought it was, but it's definitely one of those things where I would really be apprehensive with it because, again, at least to my knowledge, aside from Gale, and Gale had some bad moments, I'll bet, but Wonder Woman has always had kind of a 50-50 thing when it came to writing and the stories that they've tried to do with her. I don't know Greg Rucka with Wonder Woman. Grant Morrison, I'm trying to think, has he done Wonder Woman? Like, have I read something that he's done Wonder Woman with?
Some like Trinity stuff, not solely Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Holy crap, this is a real thing.
I may be thinking of another writer.
I love how like out of the two things I give you, you guys latch on to the sexuality thing.
I had
Well,
no choice
it's because
the listeners actually did too. The whole bi story, and that apparently that's going to piss off the internet and the SGWs. Are going to come out of the woodwork.
Take the high ground and talk about her acceptance of a fictional character into the real world UN.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
well,
sworn in as the UN honorary ambassador for the empowerment of women and girls, which was done. It's going to be like officially sworn in on October 21st, attended by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, DC Entertainment President Diane Nelson, and a host of other guests. And apparently, this is part of the ongoing 75th anniversary celebration for Wonder Woman. And apparently, it's also meant to kind of launch a new initiative by the UN, which is basically meant, for the equal treatment and empowerment of women and girls across the world. And I've seen weirder things. I mean, if Japan can make Godzilla into an official citizen, I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I latched on to the one thing because there were listeners that are actually like, I don't like this idea. I don't like the fact that they're going this route.
Those people haven't picked up an actual comic book in the last 10 years.
Well, but at that
That's
point,
true.
like, I haven't picked up a comic book in the last 10 years, but it actually, like, when I thought about it, it made sense because Themyscira. Because Themyscira, that actually would make sense to me.
It's honestly just a thing where they've stopped hinting at it, and DC has just outright said, this is the thing. This is the thing that's been the thing for the last 70 years.
It doesn't sound to me like they're going to have her, go out and actively.
No, she's not going to go on a
That's not what Wonder Woman does. So
yeah.
Maybe I'll pick this up and see whether or not Greg Rucka and Grant Morrison can pull it off, because I would be interested.
Already did it. Grant
Is
Morrison
it year one, or are they officially called Rebirth, or is it just Wonder Woman?
Well, I think it's Earth One was the book he held up because they had the whole Earth One line of
Earth
books.
One was the book that I held up, yeah, and this is part of the Rebirth. This isn't like, okay. Anyways, whatever. I can't explain it to you, Adam, any more than I already have.
All right.
Basically, you're gonna have to, like, although you're gonna need to rent out a space at the college, Adam's gonna need to pay tuition to basically look at DC Comics Continuity 101, version 3.6579.
No, my brain would explode halfway.
Adam, you always keep asking, and this has been like every time we mention DC, you're like, I wonder if it's going to be the Rebirth version. Everything is going to be the Rebirth version, unless it's exclusively
I'm starting to learn
something
that,
else.
I'm actually starting to learn that, because Rebirth is not necessarily something that's new. It's revisiting old
literally
characters.
the only time you're allowed to ask, is it going to be Rebirth? It's when it's a title called like Batman 66. Is it going to be Rebirth? No, this is actually Batman from the 1966.
Well, I wouldn't ask about Batman number 66, because that issue has just nothing but boners in it.
My brain went to a different place because I'm just like, my brain went to a different place where it's just like Batman 66. So is it Batman killing Jedi?
No, it's
I know. It's
I'm
the
trying
Adam
to
West
educate
show.
Adam. Adam, it's a show. It's a comic book continuing the Adam West TV show.
Exactly.
And they just did a crossover with Wonder Woman 77, which is a continuation of the 1977 TV show with Linda Carter.
Nice.
Now we
Okay.
just need a continuation of the George Reeves Superman. We have the trifecta.
So
So,
that like 88?
Alex,
No,
you,
George Reeves, that's the 50s series.
Alex,
Oh.
you've not been able to chime in on this. Do you have any thoughts on Wonder Woman?
Well, having never read any of the Wonder Woman comics, only ever seen her in Justice League and, now more recently Batman v Superman and upcoming Justice League movie. Well, I mean, just from the standpoint, Aldo has made points that, this just is probably more of continuing seeds that were already sown ages ago. Just now it's a lot more acceptable to finally put this character into this limelight because this is just a thing now compared to, when Wonder Woman was probably first introduced. So
Yeah.
I don't know. When I first read the story, my more thoughts were before Aldo and you chimed in, my thoughts were just like, are they just doing this to get a rise out of people because people like to get pissed off nowadays? That's the thing to do. But I think Aldo makes the good point that this has already been sown. These are the seeds that have already been sown story-wise for this. So there is justification behind it.
Okay.
And kind of to expand on the seeds that have been sown, it kind of goes back to the New 52, where she became like the god of war, but it was also a thing where she was supposed to marry Hades, and she said, "I love you" to Hades, and he's like, "You're lying." She's like, "Nope, I love everything," and she wasn't lying, and that was her kind of legal loop to get out of marrying Hades or something.
Yeah.
That was weird. But point is, like, those seeds were kind of sown when she was like, "I love everybody and everything,"
Mhm.
and people were like, "Whoa!" And
Yep.
then they came out with Earth One, where she was explicitly in a female relationship, which she leaves the mascara and she joins up with Steve Trevor, and she kind of goes, kind of that thing. And people were like, "Wait a minute, so is she a lesbian, or did Steve Trevor fix her?" And they were like, "No, listen."
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
kind of what it
so
was.
really quick before we move on to our review tonight, I actually do want to do a really quick lightning round for Aldo because there are a few things that I think he can give an opinion on. And that, first of all, is the Justice League Power Rangers crossover. Are you excited at all for that book?
No,
Really?
Okay.
Not at all?
I don't read Justice League as much anymore. I've told Romney on multiple occasions I stopped caring about the Power Rangers after the 90s. I mean, I'm not saying they stopped being good. I mean, for all I know, they could be critical masterpieces, but I wouldn't know because I haven't been interested.
You're just no. That I wouldn't go that far.
I'm just saying I wouldn't know. So
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's kind of, working off of that hype of, the Justice League movie coming out, the Power Rangers movie coming out, and kind of a good way to, ride that hype wave and get people interested in the comics.
They're not amazingly close to each other, are they? Like within a couple of months?
Well, I know Justice League's set to do in the summer, whereas Power Rangers is coming out in March. I know that.
Yeah, it's like
Right,
February or
but
March.
the hype is just going though right now. Like,
Yeah.
both of them, regardless of how bad the DC movies are, there's hype for Justice League for whatever reason I don't understand.
And then the other thing that I want to get into is because you were the one that actually tracked down the Amber Heard cast as Mara. What are your thoughts on that? Because you've made your opinions very clear on Aquaman, and so I would be interested to see, like, I know how you feel about the Jason Momoa Aquaman. How do you feel about this recently cast Mara?
Just like Jason Momoa, she looks cool, but
It just depends on the story.
It really does just depend on that movie. You can look cool all you want, but at the end of the day, you're still just a Hemsworth in Snow White and the Huntsman.
Yeah.
I don't care how good that movie looked. That was still that movie, and
Okay, that needs to become the new trope name is the Hemsworth.
All right. We'll see if we can make that work. We'll get it on a t-shirt or something.
You can still be a Hemsworth in a crap movie.
All right. Well, it is officially the second hour, and our second hour, actually, we have covered all the stories that we're doing this week, and the main reason being is because earlier this week, we were able to get into a limited screening by Funimation of Shin Godzilla or Godzilla Resurgence, And so at that point, people actually did want to know what we thought about it and whether or not it's going to be worth a Blu-ray or a DVD release or a purchase via its Blu-ray or DVD release. So let's go ahead and get into it. And this is also before, because people actually did ask me this, is this the one that Anno was responsible for? Yes, it was. This is what he was doing when he wasn't making Ava 4.4.
Apart from taking a nap.
Apart from taking many naps.
Taking many naps, taking a bunch of Prozac.
I just imagine
Acting in
him waking
Miyazaki
up.
films.
Yes.
His wife is like, Hideaki, you gotta go finish Evangelion. He's like, 10 more minutes.
Oh, honestly, given what I've read, given what I've read of the actual memoir she wrote, it'd probably be more like, oh yeah, take a break from Ava. I'm tired of seeing you depressed.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead and get into this. And I guess the best place to start with is the stuff we liked out of it. I can already tell you guys that if you didn't believe that Hideaki Anno has his own isms, this movie completely proves to you that he does. And I was actually walking out of the film going, they are Ava-isms, and no, they're Anno-isms is what they are.
They're very prominent in Ava.
Yes.
I don't blame you for crediting them as Ava-isms, but when you watch more of his work, they're really kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so at that point, I mean, I will admit one of the better moments that I liked from the film was, as much as I made fun of it, the first evolution like we saw of Godzilla, like rolling his way through the city and then eventually standing up.
Should we let people know that there's going to be spoilers? Because that's a pretty big spoiler.
Should there? Well, I guess the first thing I'm going to say is, should there be? Like, do we spoil the plot?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah,
we should definitely
okay.
do spoilers. So, spoiler alert, everybody.
Godzilla destroys the city.
Put it on mute.
Or
If you
pretty
didn't
much
get
turn
that
the
in time,
video off
Godzilla
here.
destroys the city. So, yeah, this is basically going back to the original Godzilla idea, which is like it's a natural disaster monster movie. It's not Godzilla savior of the universe kind of thing. It's Godzilla destroying Tokyo, and pretty much all of Japan.
Actually, so funny thing is, before the movie started, I checked in on Facebook. I checked us into watching the movie, and I did this stupid little quote from, I think it's Blue Oyster Cult, and I was like, "Oh no, there goes Tokyo, go Godzilla."
Yes.
And then halfway through the movie, when Godzilla's absolutely wrecking Tokyo, I was just like, "Oh no, there does go Tokyo." No, stop, Godzilla, stop.
And the SJWs came out and went, "You insensitive Aldo." So yeah, like one of my favorite moments actually was when Godzilla surfaces for the first time. We actually get to see him do what I actually would say is the first Ava-ism. We actually get to see him evolve. That was actually a cool moment for me to be able to see him like go upright, actually grow tiny little spindly arms, and be just sitting there in front of the helicopters all bug-eyed. It was great for me anyway. Wow, I apparently killed the panel. All right.
No, it's more. I'm trying to load up my talking points here. It's just my laptop's being stupid because I actually wrote down like all the various points I wanted to make. It's just a bit difficult.
Well, we thought you had more. We thought you had more to say, Adam. So, were you passing the torch along?
I mean, pretty much anything. I like the first little bit of Godzilla. Anything pretty much where Godzilla is evolving in some regard, because he not only evolves to like standing upright, but he also gets a new, at least to my knowledge, I don't think Toho has ever done it, is this new ability where he basically can now launch his beams from his back.
I think that may have come from Space Godzilla, I think, actually, because
Yeah,
Space Godzilla has like all the crystal stuff on his back.
Though I do have to say, I do like the fact that we kind of see him evolve, because I don't think that's ever really been touched upon before. He usually comes out fully matured out of the water.
Yeah.
But I think the thing I like the most, and I didn't have high expectations, because after Attack on Titan, I just don't know how to feel about giant monster movies in Japan anymore. The special effects on him wrecking the city, like, and I'm not talking about when he's like moving almost a literal sea of cars. I mean, like when he's doing the laser beams, when he expels like the gas that then turns into fire, that then turns into a laser beam, and then laser beams comes out of his back, and then a laser beam comes out of his tail, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is the most dangerous Godzilla I've seen."
Yeah,
And
exactly. Because when you look at Godzilla, he's been pretty default for the last few years. You know, he breathes fire. He occasionally gets the nuclear breath that is even more dangerous. But in this case, we actually saw kind of new evolutions from him.
Yeah, and I was just like, this is the most devastating Godzilla. Also, I think, I don't know, for me the thing I had gone into Shin Godzilla kind of knowing it was going to be a lot more serious and a little bit more talky than like the traditional Japanese Godzilla movies. But I was still like a little disappointed that it didn't feel like a kids movie Godzilla, because a lot of the Japanese movies felt a little family friendly.
Well, except for the original.
Yeah, except for the original, obviously, but like a lot of the mainline stuff, because it's Godzilla and he's hanging out with his son and they're fighting a giant turtle and they're fighting a giant moth thing, and oh no, there's aliens from space and there's so many different Godzillas. Like, it was kind of just, you know, silly and almost jumping the shark at some point.
We got a quick question that I actually want clarifications on. So Jiro's asking, for anyone that has Mystery Science Theater 3000, would it show up on an episode of that show? Are you talking about, would Shin Godzilla show up there?
I doubt it.
I don't think it would.
Think so.
I don't think it's bad enough to deserve a Rift Tracks or a Mystery Science.
No. I think this is actually one of the decent, or not the good Godzilla movies that wouldn't get that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess describing it and on paper, it does sound a little silly.
Yeah, it's just an execution. There's not a lot of like comedic material you would get from it because of
the execution for it was okay. I'm an Anno fan, and I might be considered an Anno apologist at some points.
No,
no kidding.
We've never considered you an apologist.
I may or may not have tried to kidnap his family to get him to adopt me so I could go live in Japan under the Anno estate. But
yeah, the small apartment complex that is the Anno estate, guarded by Ultraman and Kamen Rider toys.
I just need to inherit the rights to Evangelion. Anyways, the execution for this was just spot on. It was just, to quote the memes, when the execution is just right.
I will actually tell you, there was a point in the movie where it was done where I almost shed a tear. And the main reason that I almost did was because this is probably... My dad was a big Godzilla fan, so just kind of answer the Mystery Science 3000. My dad was a big Godzilla fan. He would watch the Toho movies whenever they would come up. And he was actually one of those that I swear would have been an SJW about the 98 Godzilla. He absolutely hated that movie. Hated it with a passion. So much so that if he ever could get his hands on Godzilla 2000, he would have. But he was never able to secure it. And this is actually the movie. I don't even think the Legendary movie would be what he wanted, but this was the movie that he wanted. The old school natural disaster monster movie of Godzilla going in and wrecking the city. One of the things that also kind of remind me of him is the sheer destruction. And the reason I bring that up is this is another thing I liked, because you brought up the lasers. When he's cutting up the building, you actually will see that there's blank space between, like, if you're paying attention, you'll see there's blank space between the buildings.
Okay.
And then they come down. Then they come down and it's chaos. That's a detail that is absolutely awesome, and I'm glad Anno paid attention to.
I think the other thing that I really liked, and I'm happy Anno did it, and I'm not doubting another director wouldn't have been able to do this as well, because I'm not that familiar with Japanese directors, so I don't know the skills of a lot of people like I do here in Hollywood. But I was honestly impressed with like the political execution of Godzilla.
Oh yeah,
and not just like the critique on like the prime minister and stuff like that, but also like the nuances of what Godzilla actually represents to Japan, and where Japan's place in history is right now, where it's kind of, you know, almost a little brother to like China and a lot of Indochina, and it's not kind of sure what future Japan can or can't have with like the prime ministers and the government as it is right now. But go ahead.
I was
gonna say, but also like honoring like what Godzilla actually means as a representation of the nuclear, you know, disasters in the past, including like the not so far past, like the last couple of years where they've had, you know, near nuclear meltdowns due to the tsunamis and typhoons and all these things. And kind of like on top of that, adding the fact that like Godzilla may have been a result of more than just accidental nuclear testing from the American government. Like
No, the fact that they kind of stay true to the Legendary story where he's consuming it.
yeah,
Like, yeah, but that's even more just because, it's because nuclear waste was being illegally dumped, and this creature basically began subsisting on it. And I'm with Aldo. I definitely like how not only was it kind of using it to kind of critique bureaucracy, it was trying to present how Japan would actually handle the appearance of something like Godzilla, as opposed to what a lot of people are familiar with, a lot of the 80s Godzilla movies where they went more for the fantastical. Whereas this one, just even with the not-so-polished visual effects, it made everything feel that much more real, because it's just like, okay, this is how Japan would actually respond to an actual crisis, like a giant monster suddenly appearing and leveling Tokyo.
But see, I would actually expand on that idea because, yes, I agree with you completely. I think it shows how the Japanese government would deal with it. But I also think like their first initial reactions is basically how any country would deal with it. Because like their first thing was it's some sort of meteorological problem. It's some sort of water problem. And then they got into, it's an animal. Okay, we need to go and call all the biologists and see whether or not we should be saving this guy or whether or not we should be saving the species instead of killing it, kind of thing. So I thought there were relatable things to other governments as well as Japan.
I do agree with you, but except I think this is one of those nuances that he kind of paid attention to was the fact that I think in any other movie, in an event similar to this that played out similar to this, you would have seen the government sending somebody out to go investigate it. You would have had like actual people out on the field. Yeah. And I think the joke here was that even that didn't happen. Like that's how incompetent the Japanese government or prime minister is, that they're not even willing to send somebody out to like double check what they saw. Like they're just going off of reports.
And I would agree with that. I think the prime focus was how the Japanese government would deal with this.
I do agree with you that like that is, something similar, and I think that's even something that we saw in like the Legendary Godzilla.
Except
but I think here it was just specifically that critique.
And I think here it's partially because, and this is a problem I had with the Legendary, is that at least with what Anno brought to this version of Godzilla, there was a much more clear understanding of what Godzilla is supposed to represent. Because with Legendary, we basically just got a fan film from people who wanted to create their own Godzilla monsters and have them fight Godzilla. That's pretty much was what the Legendary movie was. Whereas here, this was basically someone who actually kind of understood what the original team behind the original 1954 film was trying to go for, trying to kind of internalize, especially given the recent earthquakes and typhoons and even the near meltdowns at the Fukushima nuclear plant. It was more or less trying to helping Japanese audience internalize all of those recent disasters, much like how the 54 version was meant to help audiences internalize what happened during World War II. And that's why I like this a lot better than the Legendary film, because it felt like there was an innate understanding that was just communicated and handled a lot better than what we've seen with Godzilla in recent history.
Yeah. Alex, you've been kind of quiet on this. So what are your thoughts on the stuff that we've actually brought up?
All really excellent points here so far. It is kind of interesting. I knew, because going into this, I haven't read so much about the story of building up, because when Anno got attached, obviously sites like Animated News Network paid a lot of extra scrutiny to it. And so, of course, Anno had said like pre-release statements, and like when he was pre-production on the film, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to draw parallels to 9/11. I'm going to draw parallels to Fukushima. So I knew stuff like that was going to obviously come in as parallels in the story.
I didn't know that.
I guess I didn't. Yeah.
I didn't know the parallel about 9/11. That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, because Anno did cite like 9/11 and Fukushima and other like big catastrophes over the last several years as inspiration for how he was going to structure the film. What I guess I didn't really totally expect was the idea that we were going to follow this through sort of the bureaucratic process, which I don't have a problem with in this case, maybe because I've studied a lot of government throughout my time in school, but it's a very different way to kind of take on a natural disaster movie, a disaster movie where, because generally with any kind of movie like this, we're going to follow it through some character's eyes, usually.
Yeah. And in this, I like the fact that we followed it through radical youths.
I think that's kind of. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, definitely that. And I'll get into that in a minute. Just like, but traditionally, like what we did with what we had with the Legendary movie, we had, of course, we followed it through a military soldier's eyes and his wife's eyes and the civilians' eyes who were being afflicted by the monster, right?
Yeah.
So that didn't become so much about the monster itself, just more about the people affected by the disaster. Good and bad, I'll give it that. The 1998 movie, love it, hate it, whatever you want to say about it. Well, that was through the eyes of a scientist, through a biologist, trying to understand what this creature is and how to properly contain it. And what I know mostly of other past Godzilla movies, I've never seen a whole lot of them. It is usually just we're seeing the monster fight other monsters. So this one we saw a lot through the government, essentially through how the government would react to it, like Romney said, how they would try to contain it, and, well, how they have to consider it in the future when it's all over.
Not only that, but like I said, you saw it through radical use within the government, but you also, one of the things I actually loved about the organization they eventually get is every time they discover something new about Godzilla, the first thing they always cut to was the biologist and how he was immediately just scared out of his socks in the fact that Godzilla can also do this.
I wouldn't say he was scared. I think he was super fascinated by it.
That too, yeah, because he would always kind of look blank stares like, holy crap, the possibilities with this being are endless.
Yeah. I think the thing I liked, like, and I don't know if maybe I'm the only one that felt this, but I really enjoyed how, like, in the first 20 minutes, it's not 100% clear who the protagonist is, because we're getting a lot of points of view, and it kind of really helps to show that panic that that they feel, that where you kind of assume, like, oh, okay, so I guess we're going to be following the prime minister, and it's not that you don't follow the prime minister, because you do for the rest of the thing, but it's the fact that he, at the end of the day, he's not the protagonist, though he is a central figure to a lot of this. And I thought that was really interesting because that kind of does help convey that panic that, they feel. Shit's going down. Who, what now? What?
Oh, and not only that, but everybody is feeling the panic, even the prime minister, because he's concerned about every decision that he makes.
Yeah.
I especially did like a lot of the bureaucracy that they brought in. I thought it was especially good for them to bring up the scare of actually having to take iodine pills because of the radiation. I thought another great moment was actually saying, should we be evacuating cities because of the radiation that Godzilla is emanating? Not necessarily that he's in the immediate area, but he's like sitting there dormant, and everyone's like, okay, do we need to evacuate these base cities because of the sheer radiation that's coming off this thing? I thought all of that was handled very, very well, but I also did like the fact that, yes, this is a critique of the Japanese government, and the way that they show that is through the radical use coming together and actually solving a lot of the problems. In fact, they come up with the ultimate solution to beat Godzilla. Yeah. So at that point, I mean, overall, great movie. I will also say this, and I hope I'm not the only one that had this problem, but ever since that movie, I've had to listen to that Plan Prep Ava track over and over again because
decisive action.
Yes, boom, 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 boom,
they
boom.
Played that.
Like anytime they were trying to get into action, it was one variation, then it was another, then it was another. It just kept getting even more intense every time.
So in the last couple of weeks, I've been on a super huge Ava binge in preparation for the panel, and the fact that I bought my platinum set, and it's the best thing in my life. But I mean, to add to this, at work, I have been listening to the soundtrack as I work, kind of in the background, part of a playlist. And I was just like, as a person that's been listening to that soundtrack for like the last couple of weeks, even I got fed up with that song after the third time. They played that song like a total of 6 times, and I was just like, damn it, Shiro, you have more stuff in your repertoire.
Yeah.
I can name at least 3 more songs from the Ava soundtrack that would fit here alternatively.
I mean, in the movie, I got annoyed, but afterwards, I was just like, wow, they completely hooked me on the track. I've been listening to it all week.
I mean, it's not a bad song. It's good. Like, listen, it's on the second album. It's decisive action. It's a good song.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you knew when a resolution was or like when people were getting to work, this was what they pulled out, was yet another Ava-ism of Godzilla or Shin Godzilla. so we've talked a lot about what we liked about it. Let's actually go into let's play critic for a second. What did we not like about Godzilla Resurgence?
Unfortunately, this is sort of just the product of the language barrier for me, and that is because this movie, everybody talks really fast, which in itself is fine, because I read Otto was kind of inspired by The Social Network, so he pushed his actors to talk real fast, like real bureaucrats. So here's kind of the problem with the language barrier for me, is because there's so many characters to keep track of. Everybody's got a subtitle above their own subtitle. They're introduced. And so it's a little hard to keep up with everything and how much is going on. There's so much information I'm trying to process so quickly. This is almost, dare I say, a movie I would actually watch with a dub, and I'm generally not one to watch a live-action movie dubbed because it never looks quite right, but this probably would be one of them.
I would agree with you there. I would love to get a dub of this.
I think my biggest nitpick, and it's probably because I'm just spoiled by Hollywood, is just the special effects. I mean, I still think it looks good. It doesn't look bad by any means. Well, maybe the first mutation actually looks pretty bad in my opinion.
Well,
In retrospect. Like, not just the design, like the actual execution of the CGI for the first mutation.
You mean Derpzilla?
Yeah, Derpzilla.
Yes.
I think I wish it would have been better, and I kind of I thought it was better than Attack on Titan, and I kind of credited that to that being like, I guess, what I thought was like the equivalent of a Japanese Hollywood movie. I thought, you know, the funding was going to be a lot more. It was going to be a lot more. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an expert on Japanese cinema, so maybe this isn't the Hollywood quality that they have. But I was still a little disappointed that it didn't look just a smidge better. There were some scenes where the CGI just did not look that great. Like the fact that they're standing on the edge of the city and it just looks like there's a laser show going above them.
Yeah.
In the final planet. I was like, oh, cool. They're at an Aerosmith concert. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Stay black and black.
So for me, it was just kind of a little, and like I said, it's probably because I'm just spoiled by Hollywood. But I mean, this is the country that creates like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and makes spiky hair believable. I kind of expected better CGI from them.
I think it's reasonable, though, because I think the visual effects are pretty inconsistent, because there are some really good-looking shots visual effects-wise, but then there are like some like moments where like that looks really off-model.
Yeah. Especially when you consider the fact that at least, not even just with Godzilla, but with Japanese visual effects in general, they were like, the Japanese film scene was very much all about practical effects. They were all about trying to do as much stuff in camera as possible. You even see that in the final climax of Shin Godzilla, where you actually have like them using practical effects, using models to actually like try to basically sell the illusion that they are taking down this monster using explosive trains and then basically injecting the chemical stuff in its mouth.
I forgot about the exploding train.
And that's the thing to keep in mind, is that for the longest time, like CGI in Japan, it's still relatively new. They haven't quite got it up to the level of polish yet, because they're still coming from like a practical effects aesthetics, kind of battling style over polish, which, I mean, in some cases you end up with some really unique things, but then in other cases you end up with stuff like the live-action Gatchaman that came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm kind of there with you. I thought some of the CG looked weird. It didn't look horrible. I mean, I've seen some pretty horrible movies and horrible CG in them. So it wasn't horrible, but there were moments where stuff didn't look as good. Like, I agree with you. The back lasers didn't look good from a distance. When they were up close, they looked great. But when you had those overview of the city shots, they didn't look so good.
Yeah.
The other thing too is I'll also agree, like Derpzilla was a problem. In fact, I actually forgot to put this up. I was going to put this up in the Geek News thread, but somebody put a video to me that I think has since been taken down, probably because of the copyright, which was recreating that scene where Derpzilla is going through the city and putting the original Attack on Titan theme to it.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and it worked, but because it was silly. But yeah, that's kind of an issue with how Derpzilla looked. And even then, I still like the spindly arms. He kept the spindly arms the entire time.
And I did like the aesthetic they had where it's like they made it clear, okay, this is something that was aquatic, something that lived in the ocean, that is now adapting and evolving to form on land, which is why you've got kind of the anglerfish teeth and the fish eyes. Now, as for the things that I kind of had a problem with, it's kind of an add-on to what Alex mentioned with the language barrier. It's that you're being given so much information. It's literally like it's a fire hose of information, and I think at least to its benefit, it at least kept things moving instead of trying to slow down and basically give you a full glossary / like education in the Japanese government system. But that was a bit overwhelming at the beginning. I mean, once we got past like the initial like dump of information, it was able to really get into it, mainly because it didn't stop. But that was probably the one thing that did get kind of overwhelming. It's just like, this is so much info. Slow down.
And on top of that, because like I said, I've been watching Ava and I didn't realize how many quick cuts Ano likes to do in anime. He translated that to film, and there were like a lot of quick cuts. So you could miss stuff because you're busy reading like the subtitles, or you would miss the subtitles because you were busy like taking in these like 3-frame moments. And you're just like, wait, what? Like when they set up the office, the second office for the team, and they're moving everything, stuff on there was like maybe 5 frames, if that. Like, and it was super quick cuts, and I was just like, I don't know what to focus on.
Another thing that I actually, to me, kind of hurt things, at least it hurt my eyes trying to keep track of it. Like, I was trying to keep track of all the subtitles, and when they would go to like a brand new room and they had that big white text, and then they would put the subtitles on top of it, it was jarring to me, and it also kind of created a little bit of a headache trying to read the fast subtitles and having that happen and actually having trouble reading because of the land or the big white just right behind it.
I think people kind of like Alex and myself that watch a lot of anime, it probably wasn't nearly that as bad.
Probably not.
But I think for somebody like you, or even just a casual Godzilla fan that didn't realize how much text there was going to be in here, and how much of it was going to be going on at the same time, I think a lot of normal audiences probably would have been like, whoa.
Yeah, in my case, it wasn't even so much even just the subtitles, but it's just that you had people introduced so many times of like, okay, Prime Minister, this aid, this department, this ministry, this, and that was more kind of my issue with it, which just like, everyone has a goddamn subtitle under their name. I mean,
And sometimes those subtitles like would literally like cross over each other, and it got so frustrating. I actually I stopped reading their titles. I'm just like, dude.
Except the one subtitle I kept reading was the one for the main guy, who kept having a bigger subtitle every time a new development happened, and I thought that was hilarious.
One other thing that I also want to mention is kind of the subtle humor that was also in this movie that I actually saw people criticizing. Like, they wanted more serious into this movie, because I actually talked to a friend who hadn't seen it, or hadn't seen it this way. He'd seen it another way, and he actually got to the point where the new prime minister got put up, and you guys remember this was like the funniest moment for me, where the new prime minister just goes, after dealing with all of the business, "Oh, my noodles are soggy." He thought that was stupid. And I'm just like, I like that. I thought that was that kind of gave a little bit of humanity to the new prime minister, in the fact that, you know, he's older than him and he's never wanted this position.
I have a friend who also had the same criticism, and mind you, this is a friend that absolutely loves Batman v Superman because it's the saddest, most dour movie on the planet.
Okay.
And I was like, "You actually enjoyed Godzilla? Did you not realize there was humor in it?" And he was like, "I could have done without it." And I was like, "Okay, I guess." Thanks.
You're dealing with this horrible apocalyptic situation, and when they put in a little bit of humor, it's just like, okay, I can attach to that. I'm okay with it.
He was like, I could have done without the humor from that new prime minister, and I was like, you mean the only real humor in the middle of the movie? Okay.
Well, I mean, there was other bits of humor as well, where they would have like there was the scene where it's like, oh, well, people have been staying in this office so often, and they always have to come back so much, and then you just have all the people that are like all the misfits, and they're just like, you really need to take a shower.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. It was also in the beginning of the movie, but I love when they're in the prime minister's office, and then they go to the briefing room, and then they go back to the prime minister's office, and it's just kind of going back and forth. And I was like, I also love when he's like, we don't believe it's going to go on land. and then like somebody goes up to him.
Actually, there's one thing I wanted to bring up to you, Aldo, that like I thought of as soon as I got home, which was I can't remember the guy, but like the main guy, and there was another politician who was basically trying to be the front runner just in case the main guy failed. And so he was like the guy who was saying, we need to be more ambitious. We need to actually like go into these positions, and we could make a difference if we were the prime minister. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, like his buddy.
Yeah. Was it just me, or did some of his conversations end up being like, well, Mace Hughes and Roy Mustang?
A little bit.
Well, yeah, it's just, that sort of thing is a pretty common trope in a lot of stories. So
I liked it because especially like you could see those actors being a live action Mace Hughes and a live action Roy Mustang.
Yeah, and I think you're referring like to his friend that like when they're in the office and all the guys are like, "What are we gonna do?" And the main guy's like freaking out, and he's like, "You gotta calm down first."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that guy. Just because a couple of scenes later, when they're sitting at a table, they're talking about like, well, we need to be the ambitious people to actually step in and lead the country, and is like, wow, they actually are having a Mace Hughes Roy Mustang conversation, and it's actually working for me.
And that does remind me of kind of one of the elements of realism we also get, because you also have it where you have the moments of celebrity, but you also have the moments where they're clearly tense, because there's the point where like the main guy like even just goes off on someone, but then the other guy's just hands him a water bottle and it's just like, calm down.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've gone into or did we go into Alex's issue? No, you had the language barrier issue.
Yeah, that was fine.
So at this point, like
I thought you had a list.
Rodney has a full-on list. So
well, it wasn't a list. It was just like stuff that I wrote. They were like mini reviews, just talking points. We pretty much have hit most of them already. So
okay. So at this point, we've talked about the positives, we talked about the negatives, but at this point, like as a final assessment, can we recommend this to somebody like who isn't like to a Toho fan? This isn't hard to recommend. To a Toho Godzilla fan, this isn't hard to recommend. They're gonna go. They probably already saw it with us, kind of thing. But like to a brand new fan who's trying to understand what Godzilla is, would this be the movie that we'd recommend for them? Because I don't know if I would. This is probably a little bit more complex than what they need.
I would wholeheartedly recommend it, but I would recommend it under like the footnote that this is more or less of a disaster movie rather than like a giant monster movie.
I would kind of agree with Aldo there, because I would basically explain, like, if you want to see a take on Godzilla where it's basically a monster as the metaphor for disaster rather than the pro wrestling antics you see between like monster fights, this film would be for that, because there always tends to be those camps with Godzilla fans. Some people like the like all-out brawls between monsters. Some people like it when it goes a little more serious. And so I'm kind of with Aldo. I would recommend it, but I would make that clear. Like, this is not going to be like the stuff you would get from a blockbuster. This is not the kind of stuff you see on MST3K. This is Godzilla, where it's monster as metaphor for the actual crap Japan has gone through in recent history.
I would also tell them, like, by the way, there's a lot of, it's not subtle. There's a lot of heavy-handedness on like what Japan thinks about the nuclear situation. Like, there's also a lot of that. So if you don't kind of get that, that might.
There's a lot of heavy-handedness as to like, even though a lot of people would like to credit that the U.S. and Japan have a good relationship, there are a lot of radical U's out there that don't like the relationship the U.S. and Japan.
I mean, not necessarily that. I mean, because when you watch a lot of foreign movies like to play the U.S. as the bad guys. They totally do. So I don't think that's anything new. What I mean more is like they don't see nuclear stuff as good, not like we do here. Because even in the legendary Godzilla movie, like you have this giant rampaging monster that's destroying stuff. Yeah. Oh, but look at that. The nuclear monster is still the good guy, even though he just took a nap in the middle of a city.
Yeah, I think. Although you even mentioned when we were coming out, there was like an internet thing where it basically said like in Japan, nuclear radiation creates monsters, whereas in the U.S., radiation creates superheroes. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I would just say, like, by the way, there is a lot of heavy-handedness on like negative nuclear views. I don't think that's necessarily a big turnoff for a lot of people, but I think it's something that if you don't expect it, it kind of hits you over the head with it. You're just like, whoa.
Okay. Alex, would you have a problem recommending this to a brand new Godzilla fan?
This one's a little tricky because because like I said, it is a very, even though it's 2 hours, but it's a very fast movie at the same time, and it can be a little hard to follow with the subtitles. So I kind of give it a cautious recommendation. I mean, for me personally, this was the movie I would have wanted out of Legendary instead of what I got out of Legendary. So I can say
I second that.
yeah. So I can
You
say
weren't going to get that because Toho was observing. That's the thing.
yeah. But that doesn't mean Legendary still couldn't have done something like that, but whatever. I guess I could give it like I said, kind of a cautious recommendation. It's more based on what do I know of said person, of said fan. It's like, could they appreciate a foreign film with subtitles, and could they, tolerate being able to potentially rewind a few times on the Blu-ray? So cautious recommendation for me.
See, I'm probably the only person on the panel that doesn't have horrible things to say about the Legendary Godzilla. I have my problems with it. I have a problem with it took 50 minutes for Godzilla to show up on the damn screen. And I'm also mad at the fact that when he showed up on the damn screen, we had to close a door, shut a window in order to keep him off. But I don't think ill of Godzilla. And the main reason I don't think ill of it is because, well, it's still a monster fight movie. So those who love the monster fight movies are going to get what they want out of that. Way better than they would out of 98, as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, for this one, I don't know if I can recommend like a brand new person going into it, unless given the stipulation that Romney and Aldo put out, which is you have to look at it from a natural disaster perspective, not a Godzilla perspective, because obviously this is not in canon with the stuff they've done previously. This is going to be its own storytelling experience, like those have been.
Yep.
So at that point, you're already going to be getting a new and unique experience. Plus, I'd almost want to aim them towards like an earlier rendition of a Toho Godzilla movie, just to kind of get them to have a feel for what they're walking into with Toho. Because Toho has its own isms. Toho has its own tropes that have made their way into these Godzilla movies. Do I think I'd go all the way back to the 54 one? Probably not. Although I still think that's a good movie.
Well, yeah, and between the two, I think that's the strongest comparison, because the 54 one, and I'm meaning the original, not the King of Monsters edit with Raymond Burr, even addresses a lot of the same things of how the ultimate weapon they have to create to defeat Godzilla is equally as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the weapon that created Godzilla in the first place. Because you have the Oxygen Destroyer, which is pretty much exactly what the title says. It basically destroys any concentration of oxygen in a body of water, basically it would turn a sea into a pool of hydrogen, which would kill anything. And so, and that was the attitude it took, where it's like, well, in order to defeat this rampaging force that they inadvertently created, they had to create an even more dangerous weapon, which is why Dr. Serizawa decides to kill himself while using it, so that way no one else can replicate it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where I can't recommend the 54 version, but if you got a free couple hours, just go check that out, because it's actually not the worst movie in the world. And yes, it's black and white, but I think you'll get some enjoyment out of it. I'm trying to think of a comparison of a more modern Godzilla that I would probably recommend just to get people into the Toho experience. But a lot of the ones that I'm coming to are like Godzilla 2000, which I think was also kind of a monster brawl movie.
You know what though, like Adam though, except I honestly, if somebody was to ask me like, I want to get into like Godzilla, I would recommend them to this first.
Probably, yeah.
And then I would tell them like, by the way, this is the most serious Godzilla movie that's come out in the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's the problem too. Is like a lot of the stuff that I want to recommend is the cheesy stuff, and
I don't.
And so at that point, yeah, you're probably right. It would probably be a better idea to go with Shin Godzilla, just to say, well, if you want to be able to see sequels of this stuff, at least you can follow from this point, kind of thing.
And it's not that the silly fantasy stuff is bad. It's not my cup of tea. I don't know. Like I've seen a few of them. I'm not a big fan. When they got a little bit more sci-fi, I was like, oh, okay, it's a little bit better. But
yeah,
honestly, this for me, this was exactly what I wanted out of a giant monster movie. And as much as I would like to recommend like the Legendary, I would have before this movie, I would wholeheartedly recommend the Legendary. because it was a giant monster movie, and you got giant monsters wrestling in the middle of the downtown.
Yeah.
But I think this tops it though, like a lot. Just
no, you're getting no argument from me on this. This is better. So yeah, I'd probably go with that angle, and at least at that point say, okay, there are sequels coming for this, so you can follow it. The other thing that I also
don't know for sure.
We don't know yet. Yeah. We're only assuming that Toho is going to do more with it. But with that, also the other thing that a listener actually wanted to ask us after we had seen Godzilla Resurgence, which is, would we trust Hideaki Anno with another Godzilla film? Do we think he did well enough to be able to warrant another Godzilla film?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of agree there, because I definitely would be curious to see where he would take the idea next, because it's pretty clear he knew what he was doing, he knew what he wanted to explore, and so I definitely would want to see where he would take what he's established in Shin Gojira and just take it further. I would want to see what he would do next, basically.
I would want to, only on the condition that it's what he wanted to, not under some sort of contract obligation. If it's in his plans and he wants to do a sequel for it, I say go for it.
Yeah, but I don't see him doing anything like that.
I mean, I've also seen like good directors and what happens to them under contract obligations. Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, Spider-Man 3. Like that's all like Spider-Man 3. A bunch of other superhero movies like Iron Man 2, and to a lesser extent stuff like the Thor movie, but that's a subject for debate. But there's a there's a whole lot of movies we could rattle off. Movies made because they're under contract. I mean, just look at the goddamn Halloween movies. I mean, the fact that there's so many goddamn sequels. There's a good example.
Guys, there's a reason that Joss Whedon's not coming back for Avengers 3. Because doing contract stuff like that, it burns you out.
Yep. Really they can take his love, they can take his land, they can take him where he cannot stand.
Also, because then it delays Ava more.
Also, the condition that he finishes that shit first.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably another stipulation by Aldo. He has to finish Ava 4.0 first.
If it's 30 minutes of storyboards, I just want him to be done with it.
All right.
30 minutes of storyboards.
Yeah, 30 minutes of storyboards with another 30 minutes of just sock puppets, where it's just sock puppets.
So 20 minutes of the middle finger right up on the screen.
They ran out of animation budget again.
We ran out.
So at that point, it's just the middle finger just dancing on the screen.
I'll tell you one better. It's middle finger puppets. You get the little faces on middle fingers, and it's just like.
Hi, I'm Oscar. Hi, I'm Shinji. So I'm probably the one that this was directed at, which is because I've made it very clear that while I am a giant robot fan, I am not the biggest fan of Neon Genesis Evangelion. That being said, there are issues that I have, but I've never been able to deny that Anno can do good work when he's given the right resources.
Yeah.
And this is another shining example of that, because holy crap, I would have no problem, absolutely no problem with this series being this series of Godzilla movies being handed to Anno, but under the same pretense that Aldo put it out, is he has to want to do it. Because there's one thing that I've learned with Anno is if he don't want to do it, he don't want to do it. And he's going to make everybody's life, including his fans, a living hell just because he doesn't want to do it. So at that point, I would want him willingly going into it. I will say this for Ava fans, though. He does need to, fulfill prior obligations before he takes on another Godzilla film. But that being said, yes, I have no problem recommending it, because holy crap, he's a damn good filmmaker. He really is. He knows how to capture emotions and moments in a scene better than, I would actually say, a good portion of American directors. And it's just so dang sad that, in order to do that, he sacrifices so much of his soul to be able to do it. So, that being said, I have no problem recommending Hideaki Anno for another Godzilla film. But fulfill your obligations. It's either that, or you come out and say, I'm not doing Ava, and here's 10 reasons why.
Well, I mean, he doesn't really have to give us a reason.
He doesn't have to.
I mean, if he just came out
But I
and said,
don't want him to come out and give you a middle finger, Aldo. I joke about that, but I don't want him to come out and give you a middle finger.
I'm just saying he can just come out and say, I'm not doing it. And I'd be like, okay, I'm not holding my breath anymore.
Exactly.
I really honestly don't see it as the middle finger. But then again, this is the Ano apologist talking, so.
So with that being said, we are actually coming up on the wrap up for the show, and I think we pretty much covered all the points that we can cover for Shin Godzilla. If you guys want to see it, go ahead and take a look at it. It's probably coming out in Blu-ray in the coming months, isn't it?
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up. What's this? It's CGI Shinji sitting down talking remake of the TV series. LOL. Okay, there you go. Let's go ahead and wrap up the podcast for the evening. And first of all, starting with Aldo Gomez, if people have thoughts or questions that they want to be able to bring to you, how do they do that?
You can do that on Twitter at BoardThresh. You can also find me on YouTube at youtube.com/BoardOffline. You can also just find me at BoardOffline.com.
And also, you can find him on the latest Gaming with the Geeks, which just barely started this week of Resident Evil. So you guys are going to trust me when I say this, you're going to be in for some fun times because him and me, like just for the first 2 hours of recording, we had a hilarious time. So I think you guys are going to enjoy that. Alex, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Of course, you can find me here on YouTube. I am Shadow Blizzard 3000, where I do anime content and some gaming content on the side. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at AlexJShort is my handle, and you can find me on myanimelist.net. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my nickname over there too. I just changed it so people can find me easier.
Okay. Stephen Romney, if people want to get a hold of you for your thoughts and feelings on Shin Godzilla or any of the other stories that we've talked about this evening, how do they do that?
Well, you can always find me here on YouTube at youtube.com/StudioGhostUtah. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Romney'sReviews, no apostrophe. And I'm also on Twitter at Romney Reviews. And as for this week's recommendation of Romney's Reading Club, I'm recommending Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. It's a collection of humorously illustrated essays talking about simple things like training a dog that might be retarded, and also provides what is probably the best analogy for what it's like to actually have depression. I mean, like, when I read that in this book, I'm just like, hey, that makes sense perfectly of what it's like going through when someone's trying to explain what depression is to other people and they're just not getting it. I highly recommend it. Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. She's made other books based on her blog as well. And so that's this week's Romney's Reading Club recommendation.
Okay. And if people want to get a hold of me, the two best ways to be able to do that is, first of all, on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Drac2326. That's where Geek News is hosted. That's where all of my other content is. And I usually have a faster response time if you actually try to get a hold of me directly on the channel. You can also go to my Twitter, which is at Drac2326. And I also do check there as well. So you can ask me questions on my thoughts for Shin Godzilla, for Wonder Woman being by, whatever you want to bring up to us. I mean, obviously we're talking in the chat right now of other things that have happened, like a leaked Gunslinger trailer. You guys can ask me there. And if you want to get a hold of the show directly, there are 4 ways to be able to do it. And the first 2 are social media. First, you can go to our Twitter, which is at GeekyNRO. And you can look us up on Facebook by looking up Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions and liking it. And for both, you'll get up-to-the-minute information where we're going live, the discussion topics that we're going to be having, the questions that you guys submit. All of that fun stuff is brought to those places first. If you guys have stories that you want to submit or opinions that you want to be able to bring up, you can email us at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that's the best place to be able to do that. And also, you can follow our RSS feed on geekyweek.podomatic.com, and that will link you directly not only to the webpage that we have with Podomatic, but also to the iTunes RSS feed. And we actually do have a slew of episodes going up. I'm hoping in the next couple of days. I've been having some issues with my internet, so long-term downloads have not been the best thing to do. And also, I want to quickly pimp this because it's going to happen this upcoming weekend. We all will be at Anime Bonsai in Layton, Utah on Saturday, October 22nd, 2016. And in fact, there will not be a Geek News episode live that night because we're going to be doing a live episode at Anime Bonsai. So you guys can watch it there. We'll be doing a live episode there, but also we'll be doing a panel at 10 p.m. at Anime Bonsai for how to be able to get started on YouTube, being able to review content, abridge anime. I have a feeling we're going to bring up a couple of other topics because there's just so much that every one of us does. So we're all very knowledgeable on how to be able to do well on YouTube, and at least to our to our knowledge on it, and you guys can come and pick our brains, because we'll have a presentation, but we're also going to have an open Q&A. So you guys can do that there. And also, I just want to give a quick plug to every stinking thing Aldo is doing at Anime Bonsai, for crying out loud. He's got at least one of us on every stinking one of his panels that he's doing. Me and Alex are going to be joining him on a celebrating 20 years of Ava panel, which I'm thoroughly convinced that I'm going to get kicked off of by the time we actually get there, because we've had miscommunications here and there and everywhere on it. He's also doing a celebrating 20 years of Pokemon, and the Shadow Blazer will be there. That's actually going to be on Friday. So you guys can check that out as well. And so much more in store at Anime Bonsai. So this weekend, you're going to get full access to the Geek News crew, and you guys can enjoy that. But that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. So for me, for Alex, for Aldo, and for Romney, we'll see you guys the following week for even more Geek News, reviews, and opinions.